Welcome back everybody to Let's Play some Heavensward. Please forgive the sound of my voice. I have been pretty sick the past couple days, so I might sound a little funny. Beg for your forgiveness. So today we are taking on the Sohm, the highest peak in all of Eorzea, and a name that means eternal slumber. Now in our possession we have a magical artifact that connects the bearer to the original holder, and he really wants this thing back. Now, I'm not sure if that little, kind of half Lord of the Rings ripoff was intended there, but it's something that I don't really see a lot of people mention, so I'm not sure how many people realized it. But yeah, we might as well just call this place Mountain Doom. Yeah. Because it's, also, if you've actually, paid attention to the Cavern of Morn, and you will see it later in the dungeon, this place is also a volcano. So, rather than talking about most of the dungeon itself, I'm just going to use this time to recap. Just a bunch of stuff that I've kind of want to discuss that's been going on, just in the plot in general. And I'm not even sure if I'm gonna have the time to cover it all, because the dungeon's obviously only 20 minutes and whatever. But the first thing you might notice just in the dungeon itself is actually these flying killers are actually the galley cats, and they don't actually appear in the Forelands. The only map they actually appear in is the Sea of Clouds, and there's no mention in like the lore book around anything around here. So I'm guessing they just prefer high altitudes. And that's another kind of interesting thing I've kind of noticed, and I'm just going to bring it up now just because I mentioned altitude, is that there's actually no mention whatsoever during the course of this adventure at all, because we are climbing the top of the highest mountain in Eorzea. I'm not sure how many foams, yoms, whatever term you want to use, high it is, but there's absolutely no mention of altitude sickness. Now, I'm not expecting a game to actually like go into great detail about something like that, but I would kind of wish that they would, somebody somewhere in our ragtag group of misfits here on what I'm calling Operation Absolute Absurdity, would actually experience symptoms of it and comment on it. Now, not necessarily pointed at altitude sickness. It's possible that people in Eorzea aren't really sure what altitude sickness is, because we are the first people to be, allowed access to this place in 1,000 years anyway. But it would be like a nice nod to people who are familiar with it, to be like, okay, this is what's going on, or anything like that. It's just a small minor nitpick, but it would have been kind of interesting, because altitude sickness, there is no way to tell who's gonna get it. You just either do or you don't. Like it transcends, like race, age, build, gender, like all of that stuff. So that's just kind of weird. But anyway, what to talk about here? What to talk about? There's, like I said, there are so many things that I'm not sure if I have even enough time. But let's do the first thing is, let's actually talk about Sohm, who is still following us, by the way, because he's protecting us at Heidelin's behest, because she's kind of come weak at all, and plus, he's testing if we're actually worthy of our blessing. And so far, other than the meeting with Azel, he's only actually appeared once, like off-screen, to comment that, yes, we've kind of regained access to our first crystal of light. It doesn't really do much for us now, but the powers of the blessing are basically coming back. And I really kind of wish that there were more scenes like this of him expositing directly on what is going on with what's happening in the story. Because basically what's happening is we are climbing this mountain to talk to one of his children, Hraesvelgar, in attempt to actually see if he can, kind of talk Nidhogg down out of fucking slaughtering everybody. Now, that's why this plan is Operation Absolute Absurdity, because, well, this plan is freaking crazy, but it's crazy enough that it might actually do some good. But even so, you would think Sohm would actually have something to say about the fact that we are essentially beseeching help from one of his children to subdue another. Another of which he was kind of actually considering joining before he found out we were one of Heidelin's lackeys. And he doesn't comment on that either, because never again will he speak of a desire to burn Ishgard to the ground like Nidhogg does, even though he directly states so in Keeper of the Lake when you first face him. And even though it's kind of something that's not really, you know, consequential or anything like that, what I find, at least in my head, something kind of funny, we've since found out via the lore book that his pact with Hydaelyn pretty much involves he guards Silvertear Lake in exchange for him and his kind being allowed to reside on Hydaelyn. I would have figured it was something a little bit more complex than that, but even before we knew that, I always kind of had this idea that in that brief conversation that I'm guessing transcends the power of time, because, well, both of them are pretty much the equivalent of gods, so they can probably do that. There was a brief actual somewhat conversation, or at least understanding that went on between them, where Hydaelyn eventually pretty much just said to him, fuck you, you're on my planet, you follow my rules, you do not touch my Warrior of Light, you do not burn Ishgard to the ground, you will listen to what she has to say and follow her and protect her. Is that clear, Midgardsormr? And he's like, yes, Mom. Now, nothing probably like that happened, but considering his lack of, again, desire to burn Ishgard to the ground anymore, and it will never be mentioned again, I'd like to think that, just in my head, that something funny like that actually happened, even though I'm kind of crazy for thinking so, but it's just something amusing to think about. But I really wish that he did have more introspective moments about how he not necessarily viewable to nameless protagonists or anybody in the party, but just in general, you know, how he is, you know, how cool he is with this idea. Does he agree? Does he disagree? Is he merely intrigued by what we're doing? You know, kind of thing. Like, just get some more of his personality, because again, he is follow us, he is a key figure. I'd like to know more about him, and it would kind of, for lack of a better term here, kind of humanize him more, because even though as, you know, Dragon God Dad, or whatever the hell you want to call him, I've never really truly been a fan of gods in games, or like demigods or creatures like as powerful as gods, having either, you know, either light side, dark side, or just have a completely blue or orange morality kind of thing going on. I'd like to see them be actual, you know, kind of like people, in that they are very powerful, but they do make mistakes. They do have the same emotions that we do, albeit maybe slightly stronger or weaker, depending on the you know, said god's constitution or whatever. But that they actually, on some level, think like us. Now, you could argue that, well, they're not technically gods anymore if they do that, but, which is a fair point, but I would consider like a being godlike in, you know, sheer power and what they can and cannot do, you know, agelessness, you know, things like that and whatever. So that's a minor disappointment of mine, but again, it's something I can kind of forgive, because the story is not really about him. So I can, as much as I want to see it, it's something I can kind of let go, in the interest of time. But anyway, let's actually go switching to talk about our ragtag team of Miss over here. What should we talk about first? Let's talk about Estinian first. As much as pretty much everybody in this game gets shots fired at them, because that's just what I do, I actually have a pretty much a fondness for Estinian, because he just kind of tells it like it is, and it's really amusing that everybody is taking, like, especially Zell, oh my god, is like taking shots at him and calling him out on his crassness, but in reality, well, how should I put this? He's the most realistic and the most probably level-headed among them. Like, when obviously we visit Vidofnir and she's like, no, I can't let you in Sohm. I gotta protect my dragon people and whatever from, you know, the Nath's god and whatever. And, of course, Alphinaud is like, well, if we slay this god, you know, will you let us pass? And Estinian's like, what, are you freaking crazy? Do you realize how dangerous this is? And funnily enough, in obviously one of the anniversary stories, it does reveal that this is ultimately partly the turning point for Alphinaud, realizing he hasn't changed, even though he already kind of has, and really makes him rethink his actions and what we're doing. But honestly, I never blamed Alphinaud for making such a suggestion, because slaying primals is literally our freaking day job. Alright? So I don't think he's in the wrong for suggesting it, but I do understand Estinian's point, and I'm glad he brings this up, because it's kind of glossed over by most of the Scions that what we do with this primal slaying and all is extremely dangerous. And it's about time someone actually, like, pointed out, like, is this the greatest of ideas? Is there another way around this? Ultimately, there is not. But I actually do like how he's like, yeah, shit, guys, really? We're really gonna do this? And I like how even though he's skilled both as a warrior and having, obviously, Nidhogg's Eye, you know, giving him a little extra boost in power and whatnot, he's smart and intelligent enough to know that he is gonna be a liability in the battle, and he doesn't fight, you know, that, you know, even suggest that he come along with. It's just like, okay, you know, Godspeed, good luck, and everything like that. I need just to stay here. So I'm really glad about that, and all that lovely stuff and whatever. So and he's gonna be like that for the rest of the story. I mean, even though he's kind of an asshole, he's an asshole who's got a point. Which I find kind of interesting and refreshing among the group and whatever. Unlike Azelle, who's kind of just bitching at him in every turn, and she's taking every opportunity to antagonize him. And I'm not gonna lie, I totally ship it, because at this point it's freaking borderline flirting. Alright, now I'm not a serious shipper about it, but I'm filthy shipper trash, so shut up and let me have my ship, okay? That's all there is to say about that. It's just something hilarious to think about again, even though you guys probably think I'm utterly crazy, but we already knew that already. But yeah, I had mixed feelings about her at this point in the story. While it was nice that when we first catch up to her in, you know, the old abandoned farmhouse that the heretics have taken over, that she truly expresses remorse for what she's done, and particularly her hand in what goes on the Steps of Faith, which I was grateful for. Like, she realizes that, oh shit, you know, she's crossed a moral event horizon over here. And but by the time we actually, you know, meet up with her the second time is sitting in Dead Toe, she's kind of half forgotten about this, and he has actually been keeping his word that he is not going to raise his lance until, you know, the time comes that, you know, violence is actually necessary to progress. He's actually been very respectful that, no, I said I wouldn't raise my weapon if we could, you know, unless we absolutely couldn't handle something diplomatically, and he's entirely kept his word the whole time, regardless of him being antagonized, especially by Vidofnir, when he didn't do a damn thing. He didn't even say anything. I mean, I can't blame her for being angry with him, but, like, Jesus fuck, lady, how do you know we didn't just come up here to return the item, you know, to Nidhogg peacefully? That's not what's going on here, but she didn't know that. Forgive my kind of screaming over here. My cat just jumped on my lap. But anyway, we get back to, but Azelle seems more like she's gone back to my path, there's the righteous one. Now, I do believe she is technically on the right path, and she's not going to betray us. Even, you know, obviously, I obviously know what's really gonna happen, but even when this is new, I never got the impression that she was intending on betraying us, but rather that what she seeks now that she told us of our encounter with Freysfriggar, and we're actually going to see him, she's kind of turned back into a little smug side, because we're going to see him for ourselves, we will eventually see, at least in her eyes, that her version of the events, rather than Ishgard's version of the events on how they, you know, came to claim Ishgard and what happened with Nidhogg's Eye and whatever, that completely omits her version of the story that involves 200 years apiece beforehand, that she's pretty much seeking vindication, that her path is indeed the righteous one, that she's almost kind of forgotten that, yeah, she done fucked up big time. Which is kind of shitty that she's kind of regressed like this. Like, I can understand to some extent that, you know, that, like, haha, you know, I am going to get the vindication. And I don't necessarily think the vindication is just for our sake, but I think she's also trying to convince herself that despite her mistake, her path is the righteous one, because she said herself that, you know, she's not going to abandon this course, and, you know, she truly believes what she believes and what she has seen, and the Echo has not lied to her. Forgive me as I sneeze over here. And that she's, like I said, probably seeking validation for herself, that she hasn't been doing the right thing this whole time, and that, you know, not everything she's done has been entirely for naught, but she could be a little less of a bitch about it. Again, I at this point, I did not believe that she was intending on betraying us, but that she wasn't quite as good and righteous as she said she was. You know, she comports herself to being. And I don't think that she would be that way if not for Estinian, who obviously has the eye. But surprisingly, and I'm surprised the game doesn't address this in any sort of way, probably because she's, you know, kind of turned a bit more to the light side and, you know, is looking for kind of, you know, vindication and validation for what she believes and stuff. She knows Estinian has Nidhogg's eye. He's shown it to her. But she has made no attempt to actually take it from him or even suggest taking it from him, be it either peacefully or by force, because she believes that returning Nidhogg's stolen eye is eventually what's going to end this war. That it's just gonna be that freaking simple, despite the fact that she, you know, talking it out is something she believes is kind of stupid, but she's willing to do it anyway, because why the hell not? And I kind of wish that they actually did make a point of that at some point, that, you know, like, technically I could, I mean, granted, you know, Estinian would not let it go without a fight, and he would just kill her, kick her ass and kill her instantly over and whatever, and a fight would ensue and whatnot, and she would obviously find herself an enemy of the Warrior of Light again. But I would have found it more interesting had she suggested just something to do with it, whether or not be taking it by force or whatever, but perhaps using it somehow or whatever, with the intent of, you know, maybe if we bring the eye back, you know, on our visit, you know, maybe this will stop the war kind of thing. But she never suggests that kind of such a thing. Probably maybe because it would ultimately go nowhere, but I would have liked to see if the writers actually had considered going down that line of thought. And even more surprising, even though I know he obviously did give his word that he wouldn't raise his lance. But if you recall the Steps of Faith, even though the Warrior of Light didn't hear it, the player did, he kind of angrily expressed desire to, you know, kind of outright murder her and rid themselves of the Queen of the Heretics over here. And he's made absolutely no effort to do that either. Even though, again, he's got absolutely no obligation to our orders over here, which again leads me to believe that there's a missing scene somewhere along the line during that whole debacle that would essentially stop him from doing so. But, you know, in the whole revelation that, you know, he actually does believe her, at least believe her enough to let her see, you know, her side of the story. And his mentions of, you know, hold on, you know, we may yet be falling into a trap. Nothing ever comes of that either. He never again suggests that she's being anything less than benevolent. He will goad her back when, obviously, you know, she fires shots at him and whatnot, but he's otherwise done absolutely no harm to her or suggested any harm to her. Which is kind of intriguing, and all the more reason I kind of ship it, again, because it's hilarious. Because they aren't literally at each other's throats. They're only metaphorically at each other's throats. Even though they very well could be actually exchanging physical blows. Now I'm like all sneezing and coughing again because I've been sitting here talking more than I have done in the past like week and a half. So please excuse me. Of course, on top of this, my cat is meowing her head off at me because I'm now talking, and she's like, oh, something's going on here, you know, like I want in and whatnot and whatever. So anyway, I found that's some of the big points I wanted to cover for the time being. I'm actually talking rather fast, so I apologize if that's affecting your ability to understand what I'm saying, even with my illness and whatever. But one thing I found kind of disappointing about this dungeon as a whole is there are 4 of us climbing this place, and at no point during any of the cutscenes or whatever, or even via some kind of dialogue, are there any hints of our companions following us, and I really wish they kind of did that. I mean, they wouldn't have to, like, make them, like, you know, help us in battle or anything, but it's just, you know, like, NPCs, you know, like, chilling out nearby, or, like, in the opening cutscene, or even in the boss cutscene that's, you know, gonna come up and whatever. Just to give us some kind of hint that they are with us and they are following us and not just no, please stack with the rest of us. Not just leaving them out entirely. And it's not a game limitation because it does happen later in the game that an NPC is seen, you know, spouting dialogue in a dungeon. So it's not a technical limitation that they can't do this. And it's just something that I feel is missing from the place. Like, I would have preferred it actually, like, in, you know, either the opening cutscene or the boss cutscene, you know, and that way, when obviously you do this dungeon, you know, over again in roulettes and not in the context of the story, those cutscenes are going to be skipped by 99% of the players anyway, so you wouldn't even have to see it again. So yeah, there's that. Kind of a minor nitpick, but again, it would have just been, I probably shouldn't have stood in that, but the boss was pretty much dead anyway. And I totally forgot to eat food before coming in here. Oh well, no big deal, I'm already ahead on the XP anyway. But anyway, where else was I gonna go with this? Yes, at the right at the end of the last episode, when we just as we were about to hit the teleporter to ascend up to the partway to the mountain proper, Sohm mentions that this dungeon, this mountain is guarded by the great the dragon Tiamat, who happens to be Nidhogg's waifu. Now, why this was important to mention, I have no idea, because ultimately, she's going to play no part in the story outside of this dungeon. Save for one minor instance where I think for that reason she was probably shoehorned to have this quote-unquote role in the plot. Like, if we had mentioned her anywhere earlier, like, why would Azelle wait until literally the last second that we're about to send Sohm to be like, wait a second, yeah, this mountain is kind of guarded by Nidhogg's waifu. Do we really want to do this? I kind of wish something like that should have been mentioned before we actually started the quest to, hey, we need to climb this mountain. Like, some kind of mention that this dragon was some kind of a threat to what we were doing, besides mentioning her at literally the last second before we encountered this dungeon. And again, I kind of believe that it's due to her being shoehorned in rather than just being a generic dragon who happens to be guarding the peaks of Sohm. So it's kind of a minor disappointment there. Not that I like really need like a whole entire character backstory for it and everything like that. But it's also kind of interesting that, well, Nidhogg even has a waifu. And I don't mean that in the sense that dragons are incapable of emotion or anything like that, because we, you know, Hraesvelgr obviously fell in love with an Elysian woman, for fuck's sake. But again, like, why even mention that at all? And furthermore, and this is actually, now that I'm glad I'm remembering now, because it's actually something I wanted to mention at the beginning of this dungeon. Like, I had like a whole like half script planted out for this dungeon and everything like that, but long before I even began, like 2 weeks ago, I was planning on everything I wanted to say, and I'm like, do I even have enough time to say this all? The point about when we're about to face Shiva, and they do, we do some minor research and only find a bare bit of information about the original Shiva. Forgive me as I'm dying over here. That one of the few things mentioned is that she lied down with dragons. And everyone at the time was all like, LOL, she was a dragon fucker and all this stuff. And I was one of the few saying, I'm not quite so sure, because lay down can mean multiple different things. And you all are also talking about a book and a society and things that are over 1,000 years old, okay? Things can kind of get lost in translation. I mean, look how many iterations of the Bible there is, okay? Let's just leave it at that. And, you know, consider that the term, you know, lay down your arms does not literally mean go fuck your weapons, okay? So I was one of the few who was like, you know, maybe that just taken to mean, you know, she sided with them. I mean, maybe the Ishgardians, when that story got written, or it got corrupted along the way to make you want to think she was screwing dragons. But dragons actually reproduce asexually. Yeah, like, they don't need a mama and a papa, they just need themselves, because the dragons don't have any assigned sex. Their gender thing is more for, you know, identity and simplicity's sake. They don't have, you know, genitals. Well, at least not traditional genitals in the way that, you know, we see them and whatnot. And there's actually no mention in the backstory there that they ever did, you know, the nasty. Was there some kind of physical or emotional intimacy involved? I'm willing to bet to some extent yes, because there are just as many ways to be sensual as there are to be sexual. But yeah, I kind of had an interesting laugh at that whole idea because, yeah, it's never actually mentioned or even implied that the original Shiva actually did it with dragons. So, yeah, I felt a little personal vindication at that, you know, like, okay, you people are crazy and automatically thinking dirty thoughts over here. Not that I can entirely blame him that could have been a possibility, because at the time we didn't have any idea that dragons produced asexually. But it's something I was happy, like, that in the end I was mostly right about. So yeah, this would be a perfect opportunity to, in the background or whatever, see our companions. But this is the Elder Worm Tiamat, not to be confused with Tiamat. And to heck with you guys, I'm opening this chest because I want some gear. And of course, it's a freaking Black Mage staff. Oh my god, there's not even a single piece of gear for this dungeon for me. What the hell? That's bullshit. But thank you, Tank, for stone skinning people in during my endeavor to actually get some items, and because you were a nice tank and actually followed my macro to not double pull, you were getting my commendation. So this fight can actually be pretty annoying with AoEs everywhere, but surprisingly nobody really cites this as a difficult dungeon to heal, especially this boss in particular, especially in comparison to a dungeon we're gonna see later, which I laughed my ass off at healing at. Literally, it's I love healing that dungeon in question, and whatever, but this one has just as many goddamn AoEs on the floor. And yet no one really comments on, you know, how much of this pain in the ass and how much dodging you need to do in here. So yeah, dodge, city ahoy, hooray! Yeah, like, all this shit is everywhere. Okay, can you please not stop sending in this stuff? Okay, thank you. So yeah, this is actually just a surprising generic fight for such a worm that's supposed to be so threatening. But I find it interesting that, well, even though, you know, assuming what Azel said about men, and I already kind of seen evidence of this, I guess, about dragonkind and mankind living together in harmony for 200 years before Thornton and his Knights 12 decided to get all cocky and, you know, steal Nidhogg's eye and shit, is obviously this is a man-made built place that she's guarding. It's not the actual, like, just generic top of I mean, there's a fucking staircase behind us. Like, I'm just curious, now that I think about it, why has this not been destroyed or more dismantled in the Dragon's Rage? I mean, they had a fucking 1,000 years to do it. Like, what the heck, man? I just kind of realized that now. I've never just really paid attention to this room before, because this is such, you know, again, just a generic circular room fight. And it was actually a very long time, now that I think about it, between Heavensward release and before I actually ever saw this dungeon again in the Duty Roulette. Which is kind of weird. Like, I didn't get it till like 4 or 5 months after, obviously I originally counted this dungeon as part of the story, and I'm like, oh my god, I totally freaking forgot about this place. Now I get it like all the time. And it's actually one of my least favorite dungeons to heal. Most hated would be, would probably be a more accurate term, but I don't really hate to heal this place. It's more just annoying because the tanks like to double pull the first area. Especially with the Drakespurs, which is, by the way, tanks is not a good idea to do, because if you actually pay attention to the gear level that drops in here, it's below eye level 130 in these two dungeons, and I'm not sure about the next one. I don't think quite the next one. Well, too bad I just wasted my pushcast guy. I'm sorry. Your eye level is actually below 130 synced in this place. So yeah, you are not as powerful as you were in the level 50 hard mode dungeons. And so few people and so few tanks actually take that into account. So any tank who's listening, please don't double pull in Sohm. It's not impossible to do, but everybody needs to be like, you know, like on the top of their game and whatnot. So please don't do it. It's not very easy. Like, the tank needs to be popping cooldowns. Like, the healer needs to be healing constantly. It's just not worth the risk to do it. So please don't. Just please don't. It's annoying. It's frustrating. And it sucks. Your healers will thank you. Unless your healer tells you to double pull, in that case, well, you're on your fucking own then. But I hate doing it. Absolutely hate it. Absolutely. Well, the tank left already. Sorry, buddy. I was going to give you my commendation. See, even in the... Galley Cat! Oh, man, I rolled shit on that, too. And actually, this is not even any better than my current weapon, which kind of sucks, and I didn't even win the Galley Kitten. Oh, god damn it. That's only the second time I've ever seen that drop. Yeah, the Heavensward dungeon minions have dropped absolute shit for me. Just absolute freaking shit. Like, I've seen, like, the Lesser Panda, like, once. I don't think I've ever seen the Unicolt. I don't think I've ever seen it. Like, what the hell, man? Oh, there you guys are. About fucking time. Yeah, thanks for the help, Astinian. You know, you would have been the most valuable to use in the fight. Instead, you just left me alone. But it's alright. Alright. I'm willing to forgive on gameplay mechanics. Astinian? Astinian, are you okay? Will somebody please help him up? Yes, do you not know the eye kind of connects him to Nidhogg? Do you not know this? Yeah, just Astinian, please don't die on me. Just please don't, okay? Oh, come on. I didn't see you expressing any regret that we had to kill her at the end. You just pointed out, oh, wait, yeah, we get this massive dragon guard in the end. This is really a good idea. And you didn't even mention, yeah, do we have to kill her? Is there another way? You didn't even mention that.
To the peak of Sohm, at the end of a perilous mountain path, whence could be seen a string of pearl-like islands floating impossibly atop a sea of clouds. To a domain where dragons and men had once lived in harmony, whose majesty no mortal eye had glimpsed for nigh on 1,000 years, they came.
Yeah, we're the first people to be up here in literally 1,000 years. Yeah. And holy shit, does this place look funky as hell. Like, look at what's going on with the weather here. Like, holy shit. So anyway, we're just gonna, obviously, we have to go all the way up here to actually complete the quest. And we're gonna attune to the Aetherite. Yes, there's the freaking Aetherite up here. We're not gonna ask questions about this. We're just not. We're going to attune to this thing right away. And we'll talk to some people before we continue the quest. Yeah, it's still going to be a while. Yeah, gee, I wonder. You know, the dragons do kind of live up here. Gee, I wonder if it's that massive, just ominous dark cloud over there. I don't know. I'm getting a really strange vibe from that thing. Yeah, it's probably a lot thinner up here, too. So now we can actually fly in the Four Lands at last. Hooray! Thank God. Because that place was annoying to get around walking. But that's going to be it for this episode. So thank you everybody for watching. And I will see you next time.